Hey guys, it's Sara Mac here from OHMYBROW, and I'm so excited to share how to create my go-to pattern that has made me so successful today. So grab your ebooks and make sure you have read these instructions for each pattern before starting. For this exercise, we're going to need a few things. We're going to need a dental bib, and that will stop our table from getting dirty. We're going to be needing our OHMYBROW Boss latex mat, and this has the braided brow pattern pre-drawn on there and broken up into some simple steps. You can see it's double-sided. We're going to need our Brow Boss universal tool, our Brow Boss 18U needle, and a very dark pigment, and that will allow us to see our work very clearly. You'll also need some baby wipes to clean your mat in between. I like to have some baby oil on hand just to get the stubborn pigment off, so you can see your work a bit more clearer. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to show you how to insert the needle into your tool. So I like to break the tool through the back of here, and in order to open it up, it's just a twist motion. I like to refer to it as a twist and click system because sometimes it gets stuck, and I have some students questioning why they can't fit their blade in. So if we just click it down, it will then open up for a wider area for the blade to sit in. So there are two placement mechanisms that we can insert our blade into. We've got this center line here, and we call that the classic placement. We've also got this side sleeve here, and that's called the eccentric placement. So the eccentric placement is my favorite position to put the tool, only because it will then rely on the twist motion of our fingers rather than our hand just drawing a stroke. So when we rely on our hand drawing the stroke, it can be varied in different lengths, shapes, and directions. Whereas if we're keeping it in the side sleeve, all of our strokes will be restricted to the same movement as we continue the brow. The safest way I open up my needle is through the back here. So holding onto the sharpest part, we then just push the needle through the back and pull it out. Okay, so I like to insert my Brow Boss blade with the words showing on the outside. You don't want too much overhang, otherwise the blade will bend around too much. And if the blade is pushed in too far, it's going to be really hard to see what we're doing underneath the tool. So if you've got the word boss hanging out, you know you have the correct length. So what we're going to do is twist and shut that, making sure it's incredibly tight. Give it a bit of a wiggle side to side to make sure that it's secure. My personal preference when working with microblading pigments is to use my glove as a pigment holder, and the reason I do this is because I can measure the depth that my blade will be going into the ink, controlling the pigment flow. It also allows me to stop any knocks and bumps from hard plastic cups, so you know that your blade is kept sharp at all times. So this is a clear view of the amount of ink that you should be holding on your blade at all times. If it does get messier, then just use a baby wipe in between to clean it off. So watch closely on my needle placement. I'll be keeping it very close to a 90-degree angle, but with an ever so slight tilt forward, and that will just prevent the needles from getting stuck into the latex mat. When we are working on regular human skin, that won't be so much of an issue. Recharge your pigment as you go. Every single stroke should have new pigment on the blade. And when you're moving the blade, make sure you're working incredibly slow. This will allow the ink to deposit down the needle and into the mat. Our pressure is very, very soft. We don't want to be gouging at the mat or creating double lines. If you choose to have your blade in the eccentric placement, like I have, just make sure you're twisting your fingers as you go and you are stabilizing your hand as much as possible. The blade should not drag in a sideways motion. And if you see double lines or a thickened scratch line, then you know that you're doing that. So once you've completed exercise 1, I want you to attempt the exercise on your own using the empty lines below. Okay, for exercise 2, we're going to be attempting the transition strokes, which you can see clearly on my mat. Always turn the mat so the strokes are facing your heart. I want you to really try to focus on precision and making sure the top line hugs the bottom one. When you've mastered this pattern, attempt it on your own using the blank lines underneath. When we are doing the transition strokes, we don't want them to touch. The idea is to change direction without the lines looking disjointed. Awesome! Okay, for exercise 3, we're going to be connecting 2 strokes. Now, this stroke has a very slight S-bend. Not all patterns do. I don't want you to try to exaggerate this. Just go where the blade naturally flows. So what these are, they're a combination of the lower skeleton stroke plus the first fill stroke that you see in the ebook. So now you can attempt this on your own using the lines below. So this stroke will start at the brow base and travel through to the brow spine. And the second line that we are drawing, we are slowly moving closer until it joins up to create a single line. For exercise 4, we're going to be learning how to create texture, and this pattern is usually found in the brow tail. Now it's easy to connect these right up at the ends, which is what we don't want to be doing. We want the next line to be sitting just underneath it, and what that does is it creates much more of a feathered and textured look rather than a single line. So when you've mastered that, we're going to be using these blank lines to complete the pattern on our own unaided. For exercise 5, we're going to be extending length using this stroke pattern, which is generally found on the upper brow area just above the spine. Now the idea for these ones is that we need to extend the line and make the next stroke flatter. So our first stroke, which would have been our first skeleton stroke, would stop there. And the bottom one is going to come past the end of that and keep going, which will extend the pattern. Because the skeleton stroke comes before the fill stroke, you will need to do the top 3 lines first, and then coming in underneath all of them to extend them, connecting at the bottom and following through. So once you have mastered that, I want you to complete it on your own unaided. For the final exercise, we're going to be finding flow between lower strokes and upper strokes that usually meet around the spine area. So if you want, you can start with the bottom 2 strokes first, because that would be the order we would do them in the brow pattern. This pattern is a representation of the final fill stroke either side of the spine and how they're supposed to join seamlessly with a nice flow. They really do need to fall flat into the imaginary spine. So again, just attempting this on your own. 2 bottom strokes, two top strokes. So there should not be any crossover between the top and bottom at all. Now it's your turn to execute what you have learnt into a full pattern template, starting with the simple head pattern. I've added high speed scrubbing as I've continued down, but I'll slow it down again once I get to the final step. By the time you get to the final pattern, you're going to know exactly how to execute each step and in what order. It is important that you use the principles learnt on the other side of the mat to design your strokes with precision. Place the 9 flat shader in the center of the universal tool. We use staccato movements, which is a very soft tap with a slight pressure added at the end. This method is far more effective than a straight up and down movement and implants far more pigment. It's also a great alternative if you don't know how to use a machine or if your client does not want you using a machine. I've included 2 pattern templates in the ebook. Select one and give it a go. I'm demonstrating the balanced brow. I position my tool so that the pins are following the stroke pattern. I work my way in between the skeleton stroke and fill one stroke. I do this for the bottom and the top. Once this is complete, I work my way through the spine of the brow. If you're struggling to execute the pattern or have any further questions, don't forget we have a Facebook support group. Submit your work and I will do my best to answer every student.